We get a countdown now to count us into another episode of Behind the Glass Sports. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Aiden Dollins, joined by Hardy Graham and Will Miller, as usual. The meat and potatoes of the show, the two of them right there. Here it is. It's football season. It has happened since we last spoke. A game of collegiate football that counts for the record books has been played. It was played first by Florida State and Georgia Tech in the great city of Dublin, Ireland. First foreign city I ever set foot in, and quite frankly, I think I could go with just that one for the rest of my life. Wonderful place. Not so much for the 30,000 Noles that made the trip across the pond, so to speak. Guys, I think this is one we should just rip the Band-Aid off, and the hell happened.
It was just colossally humorous all the way around, just in every way imaginable. I mean, you have Florida State on so many levels still salty about the playoffs last season, selection process. They phoned in the Orange Bowl. By some people's estimate, they phoned in this game against Georgia Tech. I don't think that's what happened. I think but still a bad loss, but an exceptionally funny one. Just probably the funniest way you could have started the season off.
Yeah, Georgia Tech, I'm going to give them some credit because they finished first in the ACC last year in rushing yards, did not lose a beat coming out there and playing against a Florida State defense that was projected to be like really freaking good. They absolutely stepped up to the plate. Their rushing defense, was a lot better. It didn't allow Florida State to really get downhill aside from that very first drive of the game. DJ couldn't throw the ball down the field. Maybe the rain had something to do with it. Who knows? I doubt it. Maybe he was just couldn't figure anything out. But yeah, I mean, shout out to Haynes King. Way to get it done. Way to start off the college football season with a top 10 upset. The very first game played on this year's schedule. It's just incredible. It's a sign that this is going to be a great year of college football.
Absolutely, and I think Haynes King might be developing himself a little bit of notoriety here. I don't know that they're going to be singing the songs of his feats and accomplishments in beer halls across the land too many generations from now. However, it does seem
tore up that FSU defense.
He did, but it seems to me that if you start Haynes King at quarterback against a team that he is in no way, shape, and form expected to even be all that competitive against, well, he might deliver. Because he was the one that was quarterback in the was it a field goal loss in College Station, or did we win by a field goal? I forget.
That was Calzada. Right, King was the year after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Zach Calzada.
Which was still a game that came down to the final play, and a lot of people would say from an A&M team that up to that point had colossally underachieved.
Kind of disappointing.
Yeah, including the loss to Appalachian State that year, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, now you've got me on the right season. Okay, all right. Because that was the same year that they got into that absolute gunfight with UNC in the Week 1 game.
And it was Jalen Milroe's first career start.
His brother was hurt, and it was just,
All right, so maybe what I said about Haynes King doesn't actually apply. I might be making things up. However, Hardy, your point is very much what I noticed from this game. When I take a step back, give it a 10-foot look, the thing that stands out the most to me, right on the nose, is Georgia Tech was able to, impose their will on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, plainly, and they didn't even really have an up and down performance with it. They held it pretty well throughout the entire game. The other thing I thought was that, there wasn't bad football really played by FSU. Like, yeah, you could have desired some more accuracy out of DJ, but he's never been known to be that accurate of a passer. Georgia Tech just beat them. I don't know that this is a case of us overhyping Florida State anywhere near as it's as much a case of everybody in the world but Nick Saban overlooking, and Seamus, overlooking Georgia Tech as a sleeper in the ACC.
I mean, yeah, Saban did pick Georgia Tech as a sleeper to win the ACC, but he also picked Florida State to win that football game. So that's
but he was the only one giving them the
on that. Yeah, I mean, I mean, he clearly saw that their rushing. I mean, really, if their rushing defense was like middle of the road in the ACC last year, they would have been a lot better. But they were like dead last, and I mean, what they held Florida State to like 120 rushing yards, something like that. And
Seems
Roydell
like they might
Williams
have
only
worked
had
on
like
that this
38.
offseason.
Yeah, Roydell Williams only had like 38 yards on the ground.
I think this game, maybe I am being an alarmist here, but the red flags from this game to me very present, right? Your sans Jordan Travis, who was absolutely phenomenal last year, and who had Florida State had him for the balance of the full season, would have been in the college football playoff, I feel, and I think that all signs point that way. And with another head coach at Florida State, that obviously a lot of dysfunction there since Jimbo Fisher left, and really in the build-up to Jimbo Fisher leaving for Texas A&M, which is still wild to me that happened. Without Jordan Travis, it's not been a lot of success for Mike Norvell at Florida State. We saw that again in this game against Georgia Tech. Now, it's one game in the grand scheme of things. There will be thousands of football games played this season, and thankfully we're finally at a point now in the calendar where that's going to happen immediately instead of, a few months from now we talk about it and then it happens, rather than we talk about it and then we talk about it again for, 10 more weeks before it finally happens. Absolutely great.
Not much all, but that was getting old.
Right. Point being, I don't know. I think this is a bad look because he got a massive bag after being considered for the Alabama job, which is not really a secret that happened. But if they were to have like an 8-4 year this year, something of that nature, I think that some folks are going to be pretty mad.
I don't know that I agree that everything lies at the feet of Jordan Travis's departure. Not everything. That's obviously not what you said, but that so much of it does. However, in the same breath, I do sort of feel like the best hope you have for turnaround to get this team really firing on all cylinders, or a cylinder, is to possibly at some point in the season bench DJ and see what you've got in the guys behind him. Because really the main issue I see with this offense is I don't think it's built to run the ball down almost anyone's throat. Not anybody that's like competing at that level. But I do think that you have to force yourself to be that kind of team, even if you aren't. If you start to have throw accuracy issues with your quarterback, if he throws a 5-yard out on the other side of the field, I just don't know that he's going to be the quarterback that can lead a team built like this.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really allow him to throw the ball down the field.
It's fair.
I mean, earlier in the game, there's a lot of check down type of stuff. If Florida State lost a ton of players this past season. I mean, they were really good last year. This team is completely different. Tons of guys coming in. I mean, 2 Alabama guys kind of got the starting nod in this game, and I mean, Roydell Williams finished the game off 38 yards on 12 carries. I mean, got in the end zone one time. And then Malik Benson he caught the ball 4 times for 39 yards. They were probably expecting a lot more out of those 2 guys. When they got a couple of transfers last year, especially a guy like Keon Coleman, he popped off the scene immediately, made a huge impact week 1. I mean, they're just going to need more production from all of those playmakers just in general. DJ, I mean, there's a reason he was the number 1 recruit, the number 1 quarterback in that class. There's clearly some talent there. I don't know if he's afraid to throw interceptions because he's just not pushing the ball down the field. He's afraid of getting criticized, but the number of videos I've seen of him at that Circle K in Tallahassee or wherever it was talking about a Polar Pop, I mean, dude, you got to go out there and start slinging the pigskin, because if you don't, this team is going to finish 8-4, and you're going to miss the college football playoff, and your career is going to be pretty much over.
Not to get too far off the subject before we jump into Alabama here pretty soon. I feel like in this case, there's a wrestling element to it, in the sense that in some elements of that performative art, if you will, some people suggest that whether a reaction is good or bad, the worst possible scenario is nobody caring. So in DJ's case, the fact that people are still talking about him, 5 seasons on from that Clemson game against Notre Dame where he was really sharp, hasn't really done anything earth-shattering since then. He's on his 3rd school. People are, he's still cycling through the discourse very prominently. Is that the worst thing in the world, especially if he wants to continue to improve and change the narrative? There is a narrative to change. I don't know. I mean, the derisive jokes, I'm sure they get old, but, here's a guy that's still in the conscience of the college football fan.
Well, obviously, it beats the hell out of working in a warehouse, but I do sort of worry for the guy that, like, yeah, I mean, sure, you've got notoriety, but this is, I think, his last season, and at this point, I have to wonder if he's really playing for anything more than how notable his car dealership or insurance office is going to be.
But if you can improve that, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but
you could get better inflatable tube guys, bigger budget for that sort of thing.
Hey, balloons sell cars, brother.
Hey, and speaking of a guy that was pretty highly regarded coming into his college football career and has made his rounds around college football, TJ Finley and the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers will be going into Bryant-Denny this upcoming Saturday. TJ Finley has lost to the Tide at 2 teams already. Sadly, the Tide did not get to play him when he was at Texas State last year, but he's going to be welcomed back with open arms. I'm sure many Alabama fans are excited to see him play in that game because we know what he is. We've seen how he has performed against Alabama. But does anyone give TJ Finley a chance of not seeing ghosts this upcoming Saturday on that Alabama defense?
I think that one thing to surprise me, guys, is TJ Finley has actually added an element to this game ever since it was announced here recently that he will be the starting quarterback. And, Western Kentucky's had some pretty good starting quarterbacks, over the past, 10 years or so. You think Dowdy years and years ago was excellent. Bailey Zappi.
Holds a lot of records.
Prominent name that comes to mind. Both those guys absolutely tore it up. And Bobby Petrino used to be the coach there. They've had some good football teams. And they've played Alabama a number of times. But TJ Finley adding actual interest to this game was not something I had on my bingo card. But here on campus and seeing it on social media, people are talking about this game more than they already were after this announcement of TJ Finley being the quarterback. And that's funny to me.
I want to see if y'all can get with me on this one. I sort of give TJ Finley a chance to have a potentially excellent first 3 drives because, we as a fan base, we've seen TJ Finley before, and TJ Finley, he's played in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Maybe not. He's been on 2 different teams, so now I don't know. But he's played Alabama. He knows he knows the giant he's facing. I'm not saying he knows how to slay the giant, but because he hasn't yet, but he knows, how to get going a little bit. And on top of that, this coaching staff is completely new, Yeah. They haven't seen him. So I almost wonder if maybe he's able to put himself together a little bit of a Instagram reel video there in the first couple of drives. And then, maybe get 10, 14, 9 points before Alabama makes adjustments.
Yeah, last season at Texas State was kind of a bounce back year for TJ Finley. Finished pretty high up on the leaderboard. I think he was finished top 25 in passing yards across all of college football. They allowed him to just go out there and just sling the rock, develop as a passer. And Western Kentucky plays into that for sure. They've been one of the more pass-happy teams across college football the past couple of seasons. As mentioned a few minutes ago, Bailey Zappi pretty much holds every single season passing record, breaking a bunch of Joe Burrow's stuff when he played his senior season at Western Kentucky. So, for a game that on paper no one should really – there are other things to be excited about, new coaching staff. I mean, especially no Saban on the sideline. But, this definitely adds another layer to a game that most people on paper for the game itself does not have much of a draw to it.
I think that the lights are going to be as bright for a cupcake game as they're ever going to be. No question about it in my mind this time. The price of it reflects that, $1.9 million, which is on the upper end of what you'll see for games like this. But good for the Western Kentucky program to get that. But everything has fallen into place for this to be the kind of game that gets talked about, maybe not exactly the same amount, but on a similar rung of the ladder as an SEC game potentially, which is crazy to me. And it's not just because of Kalen DeBoer. I mean, and maybe that sounds like a spit take, but and part of it is because it's the season opener and you're finally drawing the curtain back on all this stuff, regardless of who the coach is. You get a familiar face coming in, in TJ Finley. I think that it's just a perfect storm of things that the degree of relevancy on this game is unlike any that you will see again for something of that match type, so to speak, of a football game.
Well, and yeah, because everybody, we know Saban had some. Here's why you sort of can and can't say it's not just the DeBoer factor. I don't think it's so much that everybody's going to come out to these cupcake games this season, maybe a little more vociferously because it's Kalen DeBoer's first season. But you almost remember, you have to sit there and think back to 2 decades ago when Nick Saban came in and didn't have a great first season. And, I have no idea what the crowds were like back then. I wasn't in pull-ups.
The crowds didn't really have Twitter to go and complain after the game is the
right.
big difference.
I'd never even had my first insulin pump yet at that point in my life. So I don't know. I don't know. However, I do know that the more fan support there is, the better their chances are against any opponent. And that the Crimson Tide faithful know that, and that they will lend their voices to the Tide if maybe they feel like they're sort of learning a lesson from the start of the last coach.
Yeah. And just another rung to add to this ladder of things to talk about. TJ Finley and Texas State beat Kane Womack in South Alabama last year. So TJ Finley put up 368 yards, 3 touchdowns on 67%, 68% passing. Just something to be aware of. Coming into this game, he's definitely had success against a Kane Womack coached defense. Obviously, Womack didn't have the same level of players that he will have at Alabama, but you would think that allowing someone to put up 400 yards against you and in a 52-48 losing effort is kind of wild stuff. Or 52-44 losing effort. So that's just something else to be aware of. I guess Kane Womack can have a chance to get his get back game after that loss last season when he was coaching for South Alabama.
Well, from spending some time around Kane, if you think he has forgotten that, think again. I'm sure he's been hitting the tape since the announcement.
As he should.
Yeah, and I'm not. Yeah, right.
It's different
Exactly.
players, but you can see conceptually what did TJ Finley do against likely a lot of the same plays I'm going to call.
Yeah, and not only that, but positionally, the same type of alignment, arrangement, whatever term you want to use. I say this a lot as kind of a joke. The jargon changed, the words of it, but jargon is still there, in terms of the changes Nick Saban made to a base defense, changes that Kane Womack brought to the base defense, and he's bringing them to Alabama. But he's a fun guy. He's always wearing sweatshirts at practice, which no one knows why. I know
because he used to sweat out a lot of games down in Mobile.
well, our guy
he's-
Wyatt Fulton
It's
always
like those weird people up here that wear biking shorts.
he always says that compared to Mobile, it's paradise here. And I have only been to the Mobile area one time in my life, which is a surprising fact for some people because I grew up in Alabama. But I've only been there once, and it was not while the sun was up. So I don't know. I honestly in November, so I don't know. But he gets asked about it every so often, and he doesn't ever really give a straight answer. But it is funny. And then I was at practice last Tuesday, and he was not very happy with the media members because he was bringing the defensive players into the Hank Crisp facility to do drills, which those are some massive dudes. Just absolutely insane to me. I do not know what they feed them. But even though, the media members were standing off to the side as we were told to, that did not stop him from letting us know candidly and show in appropriate language what he thought about the arrangement, which nothing personal. But it was, again, it was funny. I'm excited for him this year. Seems like, a great personality. He's a heck of a quote. And unlike some people who may or may not be co-hosting the show right now, I was a big fan of him as a head coach, and I like the schematic innovations that he will bring to the table.
I just want to pause you right there and make sure you fully realize that, like, trying to tell him that right now, like that, the guy who has to give a damn how Kane Womack does with his team is like trying to make an argument to me that Jim Zorn really wasn't that bad. Okay, it's just a material falsehood.
Yeah, I mean I have some some things that I didn't really love about Ken Womack's tenure during while he was at South Alabama. But one thing that he did do is, he had a number of all Sun Belt, all conference level defensive backs. He does very good job with that group. Hopefully allowing him to get his hands on some really talented linebackers and interior defensive players. He can make the most out of this system. There's still a bunch of 4 and 5-star outside linebacker, edge rusher, interior defensive linemen on this Alabama team. They didn't all, up and leave immediately after Saban left. We'll get to in a second. I'll ask y'all which one of these guys you think will be, the next great Alabama outside linebacker. But a lot of the team last year for South Alabama was, you never really knew what they were going to be. Sometimes the offense would show up, sometimes the defense would show up. There was never really any sort of consistency. All I ask is that he goes out there and brings a consistent brand of football to this Alabama defense. You don't want them, giving up 400 yards a game, especially not to a West Virginia or a Western Kentucky team in week 1. If you're doing that, to maybe like a Josh Heupel coach team or something to that nature, where the offense is going to be very high powered, I get it. You cannot allow this TJ Finley led Western Kentucky team to throw all over you and actually cause you problems. But to that degree, I did mention which one of these Alabama outside linebacker, edge rusher guys would be the one to make a name for themselves. There's been a long string of them dating back really forever in this Alabama program's history. But guys, which one do you think is going to make a name for themselves, right out the gate earlier in this season? Because someone's going to get on TJ Finley. It's just going to be a matter of time.
Well, I mentioned some of the defensive changes under Kane Womack, and I think this answer might count as cheating. But I think that Keon Keeley is going to fit right into this defense, the swarm defense, because of the versatility of where he is able to be used. A very hyped defensive recruit in last year's class, didn't see substantial playing time, if any at all. I'm really not sure off the dome if he even played or not. But he's hit the weights this offseason. He has a build weight around 235, and he's around 270 now. And he will he did some reps with the tackles and the linemen, and more in that area in the spring, because they're going to put him at the bandit position in Kane Womack's defense, and I think that's where he's going to fit. He's going to see the field a lot more in that position. And I think that the fan base and, the coaching staff to a certain extent, even though they're working with him in practice and whatnot, are going to see the real nuts and bolts of what this guy is all about. I mean, I see a completely different player than the one coming out of high school, and in a good way.
Yeah, and do you have a different direction to go in?
I think for me, I know he's not projected as a starter. As a matter of fact, I think he's towards the back of the depth chart. But there were two guys coming in last year's recruiting class that I think we could get a chance to see maybe in the back end of this game if things go well. And that's Quay Rousseau and Yanzi Pierre, I believe is how I think I remember that. Yeah. But those dudes are animals. Those dudes are freaks of nature. And I just really am excited about the idea of perhaps maybe it's week one, them getting on the field, because I think they can flash. I think they're the type of prospects that can flash. And in the transfer portal area, I'd almost worry about, by their sophomore season or second season with the program, at least redshirt freshmen, not getting enough opportunities to show that flash and show that explosiveness and why they were such a highly recruited player in some form, and potentially hitting the transfer portal and going somewhere they feel more appreciated.
Yep. I'm going to take a little bit of a different direction. Y'all are kind of looking to some of these younger guys to step up and make a big play. I think Jahad Campbell's able to come out, get a lot of run, especially early in this season. He was playing behind Chris Braswell and Dallas Turner last year. I mean, it's hard to really get on the field a lot when you have two guys that were, all SEC type of players, all SEC edge rushers. He finished last season with only half a sack. I think, just having that veteran leadership, that some of that game experience I think it'll translate at least a little bit early in the season. I'm sure they're gonna rotate a bunch of guys on and off. I think Jahad Campbell is probably going to be. I think he's going to be the sack leader for this team, even though I think across the board, each of these guys are going to be in the 5 to 8 range. No one's really putting up a ton of sacks across the board this season.
I think Chris Braswell surprised people last year.
Yes,
a guy that been on the team for a little bit, and ended up being one of the anchors of a defense that, again, I think exceeded the expectations. And good for Chris. Really enjoyed watching him. But you're exactly right, Hardy. I think Deontay Lawson being the face of the defense too, and that second level can really help him, because another young guy. I mean, the expectation was that Jalen Moody 2 years ago would eventually lose his spot to him, even if health were not an object, and was one of the breakout players last year. And if he can step his game up to even another level this year, you're talking about, like Hardy mentioned, an all SEC caliber player type of season potentially. And even though he's getting a lot of the shine, I still think that he could show himself as being worth that throughout the course of the year.
That was a weird situation there, that Jalen Moody bit a couple of years ago. That was odd. I really still didn't even know what happened.
That was something that I'm still very happy that Jalen Moody came out and really performed at a very adequate level. Didn't necessarily do great in pass coverage, but at that point in his career, Deontay Lawson had not gotten enough experience, had shown enough for the coaching staff to really put him on the field. So they went with the guy that was the senior on the team. That if I was a coach, I would probably do the exact same thing. If it's called the question, play the older guy is, usually the methodology that and of course during his tenure, Nick Saban turned to a lot.
Yeah, just the guy that knows what the staff is asking him to do, understands the communication, understands the expectation, understands the situation just that much a little bit better,
Yeah. But of course, this year, as mentioned, new system. So who knows? All of that could be out the window bright and early this season. Again, this Western Kentucky game should expect to see a lot of guys on the field, a lot of guys rotating in and out of this game, receivers. Hopefully, Milroe can start the season off on a really good note. Unlike some of the stuff that he started last year on. Hopefully, he looks like second half Jalen Milroe versus first half, and he starts throwing his name into some Heisman discussions very early on.
I think you combine the new system thing you're talking about, and we tie it in with all of the what we've mentioned about the offense that they like to run there at Western Kentucky, and TJ Finley's familiarity not just with Alabama but with Kane Womack's defense. And the fact that this is not something we've mentioned. I don't really I think I've seen enough people mention it. Certainly haven't myself. The fact that you're right. We might be talking about some of these guys we expect to step up big, and like how much better is Deontay Lawson going to be this year? And some of these guys might really struggle with the system change. Like that is not something that can be wrote off. That's not a given that they're just going to pick up the pace and also get better, along the way in this offseason, trying to relearn everything. So I don't think anybody should hang their head and feel all doom and gloom if, about the projection of the season. If Alabama goes out there and has to win the game 35-28.
Twitter will burn if that happens.
It will. It absolutely
you're
will.
right.
Twitter,
it's going to be a screaming server room.
What you said is correct, but Twitter does not really place a premium on objectiveness of the information.
The combination of words you're putting out in the world on that platform, before you send them out, the notion that they are based in reality is not a requirement.
Exactly. Yes.
This is very true. But to that point, Alabama does play 2 quote unquote cupcake games before they play a power conference opponent when they play Wisconsin week 3. So hopefully, getting 2 weeks of game experience, allowing some of those redshirt guys to get on the field a little bit, use 2 of those 4 games that they're going to be allowed to play throughout this season, will, mean a lot moving forward. For me, just the last thing on this, I'm just excited to see all these guys, out here for the first time in both the new offensive and defensive system. New transfers coming in, which lost a lot of guys from last year's team. So just
I think less than maybe a lot of people would have expected.
Yes, but to that point, still a lot of guys that need to make a name for themselves. Anybody have something else to add before we move on to the next topic on the list?
Yeah, actually, one quick thing, just a production note. I screwed up the link I put out into the world. We have a multitude of we have people trying to join the stream with us, trying to watch the stream because I posted the wrong link. So I'm going to repost everything. If you're waiting in the waiting room to hop in here with us, refresh the page soon.
And while he does that, I will pose another hypothetical that's sure to send Twitter into some craziness. What will happen if on September the 7th, the dedication of Saban Field, if the USF game for a second year in a row is close again?
I feel like we can get into that next week.
That's fair, yeah.
But the guy with, I think if we have another close game week 2 against USF, things might take a turn for the worse this season.
I just don't know if it would send me to the floor in shock. They have Byron Brown returning. Alex Golesh is a guy that has now proven that he can have success against Alabama scheme. Now, again, that was a different who knows? I think Byron Brown behind Caden Salter is the second best quarterback in the group of five this year. So, and that's even with the fact that, he was a run first guy last year and maybe still needed to shore up the pass game. But one of the best athletes in the sport. I don't know, a lot of unknowns early on. I think that's another part that you touch on being, unknowns from the standpoint of a coaching staff, from how the players are going to adjust. But I mean, really, nothing's ever certain until you just play. You get out there and you play a game. That starts on Saturday, goes into next Saturday, and beyond, even though you do have a 2-bye-week season, which that's going to be weird. But again, you're just never certain of anything, until the curtain's back on your first official game. It feels like only then this stuff can really definitively start to be answered.
So for that reason, perhaps it would be fair to say that if they're going to play a cupcake in week one anyway, maybe you get that real world data to start working towards your next game and the rest of your season on 1 week early and play a week 0 game. I don't know if anybody's ever had that idea before, if this has been discussed amongst the class, Alabama potentially playing a week 0 game, for all the reasons that you're mentioning about, just wanting to see the reality of where you are with everything you've been working on. That's a thought I'm having for the first time. Never had it before.
Yeah.
Why?
It'd probably be a silly thought to put your team out there week 0 in front of a national audience where every single person in the country is only focused squarely on you. Especially under a new coaching staff, I feel like that would be a little bit of a dumb decision, especially when you can go to Ireland and lose on a last-second field goal to another Power 5 team that you didn't think would have a shot of winning the game.
Just score more points, Hardy. It's not hard.
Hey, yes, just score more points. But yeah, I don't see Alabama playing any week 0 games ever. I don't think that's going to be a possibility.
Yeah, they're never playing Hawaii again. All it took for that to happen was for Hawaii to win the game, which they did one of the times. And that was the last time that Alabama had played a non-power team in a true road game until USF last season. And
strange stuff, man. They went to I could be mistaken, but did they not go to Kent State one time?
No. Kent State came to Alabama on multiple occasions.
I don't think Saban missed his bed there. I think his new one's pretty nice.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them in a lot of bedrooms, as is the case with the caliber of houses that Nick Saban can now afford.
The caliber of houses along every foot of shoreline on that lake.
It was pretty clear after USF last year, though, Saban is never doing that again. He was never doing it again. It was, and maybe in another life we're having that conversation seriously because Saban is still the coach at this time. But that's not the case.
You think that was the issue? You think that is the kids started coming in the meeting after the season talking about they want more money and this and that and yada yada, the way he and Terry mentioned, and in the back of Nick's head, all he's sitting there thinking about is the 3 balls that guy dropped in the USF game, the coverage that guy missed in the USF game, the chip on the edge rusher before he went out in the flat that guy missed in the USF game. Is that what happened? These kids came to Nick Saban and said, it's the NIL era, Grandpa. We need more money, please and thank you. And all he could think back to was the USF game.
You asked that question.
Possible.
I think it is possible, and I think it's true. I think that game had a non-zero contribution to the retirement of Nick Saban. Like that exact contest. I really do. Because I think that, and I don't really know. I don't even know what went wrong in that game, and I was there. I don't know why.
Oh, that's right. You did make that drive.
What happened. I don't have any understanding whatsoever. Other than maybe, like I said, maybe Alex Golesh just had his number. But I think if you want to look at games that may or may not have altered Nick Saban's decision-making process, I'd put that one right up there. The Rose Bowl we know is up there because of what Nick Saban himself has said. But I think that one's up there too.
All right.
Yeah.
We got 1,700 games between Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this week. Don't worry, folks. We've filtered out the 1,695 that are going to suck. These are your 5. Hardy, get the ball rolling.
All right. First matchup of notes, bright and early, 11 a.m. kickoff in Atlanta, Georgia at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The number 14 ranked Clemson Tigers take on the number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs. Dogs enter the season, of course, as I just mentioned, ranked number 1 in the preseason polls. Dabo Swinney, this program was built on God's name, image, and likeness. Did not necessarily bring in a lot of transfers, if any, this offseason. Cade Klubnik is back. This Georgia team should, is after knocking out Florida State in the Orange Bowl last year, is poised to return to the college football playoff. Second year with I'm blanking super hard on his name right now. Quarterback Carson Beck, and so guys, do we give? Clemson any sort of shot in this game? Cade Klubnik's got to play exceptionally well. I think if they're going to have if this game's going to be close at all.
No, and I think it's almost inconceivable how utterly woeful Clemson has been on offense since Trevor Lawrence left. It is astronomically bad. There have not been a tremendous amount of signs that things are on a dramatic upswing. We all recall last year's game against Florida State in Death Valley that was pretty close. I think environment probably contributed to that one. I liked Florida State last year. I thought they were one of the best teams in the country, but they were never the kind of team I thought that was going to beat the brakes off pretty much anybody. But Clemson has stagnated, and a lot of that I think is on Dabo. He is very obstinate, very stubborn, and I think everything that's happening, he's pushing back just for the sake of it. And how that has manifested itself is in a power 4, sounds weird, offense that cannot score points.
Hardy, piggybacking on that,
yes.
I want to ask you, what do you think would be the outcome if on Saturday in the Mercedes-Benz Dome, Georgia was playing Iowa instead of Clemson? How do you think that game would go?
Quite frankly, I think Georgia would curb stomp Iowa way more than they would Clemson. Cade Klubnik is a senior quarterback. That does matter to me, at least in college football. He's got a lot of experience. In every single game he played last year, every single one, he had more passing yards than the other team's quarterback. He's very competent, very highly. He was highly rated coming out of high school. This Clemson team does have players on the roster that can go out there and make plays. I think at the end of the day, Georgia's got just way more, and I would put all of my eggs in a basket on Kirby Smart over Dabo Swinney, especially now that Dabo does not necessarily have a generational quarterback behind the helm, a generational college quarterback, anyways.
And that right there, not the quarterback bit, but the Dabo and Kirby bit. Those two men having to go against each other is where this goes from a basic store-bought yellow cake to some decadent German chocolate concoction. Even if the rosters were a little bit closer, because there's a chasm between the level of player on those two rosters, but even if that chasm were much smaller, Kirby Smart would mop the floor without Fabuloso with Dabo Swinney. Is out coaching him one-on-one, man-to-man. Kirby Smart is vastly more intelligent, vastly more willing to believe in his players and roll the dice and just, makes better decisions, doesn't make decisions from a place of ego. It seems that probably for about a half a decade now, every decision Dabo has made in his roster management, in what he says to the media, in how he, runs his program, and the plays he calls in football games has been from a place of ego. No, I know what'll work, and I'm going to do it my way. That's why Georgia's not even going to be able to see Dabo's squad in the rearview mirror by the end of the game.
All right. Anyone have anything else to add on this game before we move on to game number 2 on the Hardy Graham Big Board?
Yeah, I agree with Aiden, and he nailed the problem with Clemson.
Yeah. All right. Game number 2.
Thanks. I'm glad you're here, Will.
No.
Thank you, Aiden. Likewise.
Game number 2, also at 11 a.m. This one on Fox. Penn State, currently ranked number 8 in the nation, taking on West Virginia. That game is at Milan Puskar Stadium in Morgantown, West Virginia. I, was very excited to talk about this game because I am a Garrett Green believer. I think West Virginia will be very close to the top of the Big 12 this season, a conference that is as wide open as just about any. I think he's going to be able to put a lot of, good things together. And quite frankly, I think West Virginia is going to beat Penn State right here in Morgantown. That is my hot take for the week. I do not believe in Drew Ayler. I do not believe in James Franklin. I think especially with all these other teams coming into the Big Ten, Penn State only slides further down the ladder in terms of the Big Ten hierarchy. They lose in a close one, 24-20 in Morgantown is my guess.
2 points to make. Number 1, I like Neil Brown, so I hope that happens. Number 2, there will be books written in the decades that follow this conversation about how one single win has propelled the career of James Franklin, that being the 2016 upset over JT Barrett and Ohio State, which was a great game, a classic and
fantastic game. Yes,
it was, and
couldn't have had anything to do with turning Vanderbilt into a watchable television product.
Yes, but we are far removed from that, and Vanderbilt had so much better players back then. Of course, you could then make the argument that he recruited them, but I think in Penn State's case, did that give the program a jolt? And it sorely needed that jolt after everything that had happened, trying to move on from. And Bill O'Brien did a nice job with that, but then he went to Houston, where he had a better career than he gets credit for. But Penn State, from that moment on, joined the table of the hype machine, the perpetual hype machine that never delivers. And it's every year with this. And, we're now on season 8 of it. So when you look at games like this that Hardy has highlighted, I think that this is exactly the game to highlight, because this is the kind of game that is tailor-made for Penn State to lose.
But do you think they're going to lose, Will?
Do I think they're going to lose? No, I can't say that I do. But it is a possibility that, it's just, you guys know what I'm talking about. We've watched enough college football to know certain teams.
I mean, on the road.
Did they play games on Saturday? I forget.
Got a lot of games going on this Saturday. I'm going to be sitting my happy butt in a chair all day. And
I did not sign up for the overtime shift.
Gotta love that.
I do have a thought here, and I share this thought as somebody with a giant, massive "Welcome to West Virginia" sign in my garage from the multiple summers I spent out there. A great deal of affection for that area and that program and the fans of that team. That being said, I don't think that we can really fairly sit here and call Penn State one of the conductors of the hype train that never delivers. One of the mid-level managers of that transportation line. We can't call them that without also acknowledging that West Virginia's their seat's getting pretty comfy on that train. This is a program that they don't very seldom does anybody genuinely have any kind of national aspirations for them. But their fans tend to oftentimes think this is the year that we're finally relevant again. And that's their line of demarcation. For Penn State, it's not being relevant again. It's about competing on the national level properly for a championship. That's what they never deliver on. West Virginia's had a really difficult time delivering on being like worth talking about for more than 3 weeks of the season. And so, it does seem like the kind of game that Penn State would lose. And yeah, it's being played in Morgantown, and it's going to be a ruckus atmosphere. It's going to be an awesome game. And I don't think West Virginia wins it. They come up just short like they do in so many situations that could be so good for their program and their fan base.
Fair enough. Moving on to game number 3, very hot topic game, 2:30 p.m. kickoff in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in Gainesville, Florida. The two coaches with the hottest of hot seats playing in a stadium that is going to feel like 105 degrees outside. Mario Cristobal, Billy Napier, we talked about it a little bit last week. So just to start off, I have Miami winning the ACC. Last week, I was squarely on the Billy Napier is getting fired before Mario Cristobal train. I had Miami winning that game in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. I think the line is like 2.5 in Miami's favor, which is, if you're Florida, to give a Miami team entering your stadium to 2.5 points, you should be ashamed of yourself. And to that notion, I think Miami's going to cover it without issue at all. I think Cam Ward, Damian Martinez are going to be the two best offensive players on the field. I do not think handoff merchant Graham Mertz is going to, play at an elite level especially on Saturday. This Billy Napier, Mario Cristobal game, it's a grudge match. It means a lot for both of these guys. It can definitely turn the tide of both of their seasons. Can more or less decide the fate of both of their jobs at these prominent Power 4 schools.
I have Miami winning this game. I don't think this Florida team's very good. I don't think this Florida team thinks this Florida team is very good. I think anybody with a preschool level education can see the writing on the wall here, and it's a very unfortunate spot. But it's also inevitable at this point, I feel. I think Billy Napier's probably out before Thanksgiving, and that honestly may be like a longer-winded expectation than some people have. If Florida loses this game, thanks, Hardy. If Florida loses this game, it then becomes a very real possibility that Billy Napier does not see Halloween. Brian Harsin was at least fired on Halloween.
Shout out him.
Yeah.
Spooky season.
But, I mean, this is – and Miami can't really afford to lose this game either, bringing in Cam Ward, one of the best portal quarterbacks on anybody's list. I think Mario Cristobal did not shine last year in more areas than the one we're all thinking of. And he can't afford to lose either. I don't think his seat is as hot as Billy Napier's. I don't think his seat is as hot as Sam Pittman's, but it's on there. So, setting the scene for this game. It's must win, but I think Miami's going to win.
I think I have to go with you guys. I think I have to go with Miami because Miami at least has pieces, and I'm just not really all that convinced that Florida has pieces at all. And also if this team does really get into desperation mode, which I do think they will, good teams that play themselves behind the 8 ball and get into desperation mode, trying to save their coach's job, save their season, whatever, they can pull it together and go on a run that nobody expects them to. But I think oftentimes when a middling or even just bad team and bad roster finds themselves playing with that mindset, it tends to only make, the hydroplaning worse. At that point, you're going to go from all over the road to straight into a tree. That's likely what's going to happen. I know, Hardy, that, more and more since we've had the conversation about how long Billy Napier lasts, I agree with you. He's not going to make it to that homecoming game. I thought after the homecoming game, when they're going to lose to Kentucky.
Yeah,
More
I
than
think that's
likely.
who they play.
Yeah, it is Kentucky,
Um,
and I think they're going to lose that and fire him. But I think Hardy, I think you're right. It's going to be obvious within 3 or 4 weeks if there's
yeah, you'll know.
anything
I mean,
to go.
yeah.
It's gonna be like how Washington was, waiting till the end of the season to fire Ron Rivera, and they were giving him a chance to turn it around, and maybe he was at minimum gonna make it to December, but you were gonna know when you knew.
Yeah, Florida plays the toughest schedule in college football. Aiden alluded to it. I think after they lose to Central Florida and Gus Malzahn, Billy Napier gets canned. Moving on to the next game where a coach is replacing someone that just got canned. Texas A&M and Notre Dame in Kyle Field in College Station. Got a top 20 matchup. Texas A&M enters the season at number 20, Notre Dame at number 7. Riley Leonard takes over at the helm for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Sam Hartman was in that position last year. He looked great week 1 when they played in Ireland. Thought Notre Dame was going to be really good this season. I think Riley Leonard's going to be able to do just about the same thing, especially against A&M, new head coach, all of that kind of stuff. Big time matchup for both programs, especially to start the season. I have more faith in Riley Leonard than I do Connor Wigman. But 6:30 p.m. kickoff in Kyle Field on ABC. Everyone is going to be watching that game. It's the big ticket game for Saturday nights, and we've seen Notre Dame lose games like this, but I think this is the one that they're going to be able to pull out and get a win.
I disagree. I think Notre Dame will lose this game. I think Notre Dame is the most overhyped team in the top half of the rankings this season. There's a lot of familiarity in this game that's not being talked about with Riley Leonard and Mike Elko, with obviously their time at Duke overlapping, where they did really nice things, including stifle that anemic Clemson offense in the opener last season, to really put a bow on the direction that whole ship is going, which is to say,
Wait. Pause. Shout out to the crowd for that game. Might have been the most electric stadium atmosphere I've ever seen.
which is to say downwards and under the water. But I don't know. Neither team is mind-blowing to me. But I think that the Kyle Field environment is just difficult enough that a Notre Dame team with, a lot of fizz without a ton of soda is going to struggle. I think that Mike Elko is going to know what makes Riley Leonard tick. And that is the difference in this game to me. It's going to be close. But I think with those factors, they're just going to out-tactician Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's not going to have the difference in talent to make up for that in that environment.
I don't disagree with you. I think you actually took the words out of my mouth for a lot of this. The environment is a factor. It is absolutely a factor. It is difficult to play at Kyle Field. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how long the head coach has been there. That's a din of a stadium.
And he went 9-3 at Duke. He's not, Mike Elko. He's not a slouch.
No, exactly. And he comes with a bit of that tag that Matt Rule does, and really that Nick Saban did when he showed up in Tuscaloosa for the first time. Not so much a staying power, but somebody that comes in and rights the ship and does it really well and does it really quick. That's kind of the bill that Mike Elko comes with. And so you're expecting a hot start from him because that seems to be what he does with programs. Who knows if it lasts, but you expect a hot start. And I think exactly like Will said, if you're telling me that former head coach and former quarterback for said head coach are going to go at each other for two different teams, new programs, I'm going to go with the coach. I think the coach has more ability to make the quarterback uncomfortable than the quarterback does have ability to surprise the coach. Because they did do great things together and Duke. And those great things don't get accomplished without knowing the ins and outs of Riley Leonard as a quarterback. If you're Mike Elko, and without knowing, exactly what Mike Elko expects out of you for things. If you're Riley Leonard, they've worked together so much to achieve those things that were overachievements that were harder for them to accomplish than it would have been for other teams that, they know each other too well. And I'm going to side with the coach in that contest.
That is more than fair. Finally, moving on to the last game we're going to talk about, we can get through this pretty quickly. USC takes on LSU at Allegiant Stadium Sunday night. It is the big ticket game. Brian Kelly is playing in yet another standalone game, week 1. The past 2 seasons, he's faced off against Florida State. This season, playing against USC, Miller Moss, Lincoln Riley, Garrett Nussmeier is going to take the reins for this LSU offense after seeing the departure in the Heisman Trophy season of Jaden Daniels. Brian Kelly has not been great in these openers since he arrived on campus at LSU. Last year, the defense was really, really bad. I think they definitely turned things around. I think LSU is going to finish closer to the top of the SEC than they did last year, even with, how successful of a season they did have last year. I think they're going to be more well-rounded. I think both offenses are going to be clicking. Miller Moss, first game of, I guess he started in the bowl game last year, but first regular season start in his career. I think it's going to be a big challenge against what I imagine, as I said, is an improved LSU defense. And I do think Brian Kelly finally gets the elusive week 1 win that he's been searching for since he arrived in Baton Rouge.
I don't really have much of a clue who I think might win this game. And I think it's mostly because the departure of Jaden Daniels is just, you have no idea, it's going to be a big piece of the pie, but you have no idea how big of a piece until you get in there and see it. And obviously this LSU team, top to bottom, is better put together and better coached than this LSU team is better put together and better coached than the USC program. But again, Garrett Nussmeier seems like a capable quarterback. He might even be capable of great things. I haven't seen him yet. I did see what Jaden Daniels did and pulled out of his butt when things collapsed, and they scored a lot of points in those scenarios. So we'll see if it comes together without him. However, I will be rooting for LSU. All right, I'm not a fan of the Tigers. I'm not a fan of Brian Kelly. He killed the kid. But I will root for a murderer if they're playing against Lincoln Riley.
That's a soundbite. I think LSU will win this game. Not to gloss over what you just said, Aiden, because that is just a hell of a quote. I'm not super high on Garrett Nussmeier. You got to show me something after what Jaden Daniels was able to do. The key for LSU this season is going to be health. They were, particularly on defense last year, not only bad, but just addled. Everybody hurt. And that can't happen again. It's put up or shut up time for Lincoln Riley. And I think things are going to be all quiet in Southern California, especially sans Caleb Williams, who, for all of the hoopla, I think was a really freaking good college quarterback. And you don't have him anymore. He's what made your team go. If you're Lincoln Riley and your track record is quarterback excellence, that's what makes you go. This is a nightmare scenario for Lincoln Riley because he's playing this game week 1 against a guy who, like Hardy pointed out, doesn't have a lot of success week 1 and against another team that's kind of retooling and finding a new identity, and they're going to lose. This is a disaster.
Yep. I think overall got a bunch of great games on the docket this upcoming weekend, starting tomorrow night. Very excited to, really get into the meat and potatoes of this college football season, as Aiden alluded to right off the top of this show. Does anyone have any kind of closing things to discuss? Any other games you want to just touch on real quick before we get out of here?
My one sentence to wrap up the show is Colorado's going to lose tomorrow to North Dakota State. It's going to be fantastic. Whoever scheduled that game should lose a month's paycheck at minimum. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Premier League lacrosse playoffs start this weekend. highly competitive games. It's been an excellent, not just excellent lacrosse. Professional lacrosse has always been high quality, but it's been a really, really excellent television product for the casual consumer seeking sports entertainment. And I think that if you haven't given lacrosse a try this summer, you should go ahead and fire up that ESPN Plus account, or throw on ESPN2, whatever it's on, and give it a shot, because it's really, really excellent what they're doing with the TV broadcast to make sure that for the everyday person, this game is as entertaining as it is for us that play it. So with that, go the hell home, or not. But you can't stay here. I gotta poop. The baby needs a diaper. Hardy, like, he's got to go to bed. This dude goes to work at like 1 a.m. So thanks for coming. Please